In those chaotic, hopeful, and frankly pretty scary days after Tunisia's 2011 revolution, a powerful, anonymous voice just sort of emerged from the digital world. It was a blogger named Neisenut who used words as his weapon, his canvas, and his mirror to show the soul of a nation in flux. So today, we're going to dive into the creative force that was Neisenut and really try to understand why his voice was so essential in that critical moment.
We're starting with this quote because, honestly, it just nails Neisenut's whole vibe. This isn't just about revolutionary passion. It's about nuance. It's about skepticism. It's this idea that no single group, no matter how wronged, has all the answers. This really sets the stage for a voice that's just as critical as it is passionate, a voice that was willing to question the very idea of victory. So, who was this voice? Well, the blog, simply called Neisenut, quickly became something you just had to read. It wasn't just some other political blog. No, this was like a living document, capturing the pulse of Tunisia at this historic crossroads after President Ben Ali fell, and it chronicled the very difficult birth of a new democracy.
And it was really this unique mix of sharp analysis, brutal satire, and heartfelt poetry that made Neisenut so magnetic. His anonymity, that gave him the freedom to be completely brutally honest. And his creative range, that let him connect with people on both an intellectual and an emotional level, helping them make sense of the chaos all around them.
Okay, so to really get what made Neisenut so powerful, you have to look at his creative toolkit. He wasn't just one kind of writer. He wore these different masks, right? He'd adopt different personas to get his message across. Let's dig into these three key styles. First up, we've got Neisenut the analyst. This is his most direct persona, clear-eyed, incisive, and totally unafraid to make these blunt assessments of the political mess that was unfolding. He just cut right through all the celebratory noise with cold, hard logic.
And this quote, it's a perfect example of that analytical style. This wasn't wishful thinking or some revolutionary fantasy. It was a practical, almost cold, evaluation of the new leadership's ability to actually run the country. He saw their inexperience as a huge weakness, a really dangerous vulnerability for the new Tunisia. All right, so next up, we've got Neisenut the satirist. When just pure analysis wasn't going to cut it, he used humor, caricature, and mockery as a weapon to expose hypocrisy, especially when it came to what he saw as foreign interference in Tunisia's unique culture. This poem is just brilliant. It's funny, but also fiercely protective. He's defending Tunisia's incredibly deep intellectual and religious heritage. He's referencing Zaytuna, one of the oldest universities in the world, and Kairouan, a major center for Islamic scholarship. And he's doing it to push back against what he sees as arrogant outside influence. What a way to defend national pride, right? All wrapped up in a satirical punch.
But, maybe his most powerful side was Neisenut the poet. This is where he went beyond analysis and satire to capture the raw, unfiltered emotion of the moment, the collective pain, the grief, and the anger of a nation dealing with tragedy. He wrote this right after the assassination of the secular politician Chokri Belaid, which was a huge shock to the country. The poem doesn't just talk about an event, it condemns the people who did it, in these visceral, almost biblical terms, basically stripping them of their humanity. Through his poetry, he gave a voice to the whole nation's grief and its rage. Okay, so we've seen his different styles, right? The analyst, the satirist, the poet. But these weren't just for show. They were all tools to push some really powerful ideas about Tunisia's identity and its very fragile democratic future. And this slide, this comparison right here, it really gets to the core of his whole political philosophy. On one side, you have this passionate defense of pluralism, the idea that disagreement isn't a weakness, it's actually a strength. And on the other side, his biggest fear, that the revolution would just swap one kind of authoritarianism for another, trading a single party for a single intolerant opinion. And that, of course, leads us to one of the biggest themes on his blog, his relentless critique of the Islamist party, Ennahdha, which came to power right after the revolution. So how exactly did he see their role in this new Tunisia? And there it is, in one stark, absolutely unforgettable metaphor. For Neisenut, this was the great danger. He argued that Ennahdha was using the tools of democracy, elections, political parties, not to build a society with many views, but as a Trojan horse to sneak in an undemocratic ideological agenda. But you have to understand, underneath all this political critique, there was this deep, just profound love for a very specific idea of what Tunisia was. It wasn't just some abstract nation. It was a unique, multicultural, modern identity with incredibly deep historical roots that he felt was under threat. This is from a post he called My Tunisian Pride, and man, it just lays out the sheer scale of his vision. He lists historical figures from ancient Carthage, from Islamic Golden Ages, and modern secularists. He includes ethnic groups from Berbers to Arabs to Jews. For Neisenut, Tunisia's real strength was this incredible mix, a mosaic he fought to protect from what he saw as a narrow, single-minded ideology.
So it really only feels right to end this where Neisenut's voice was often at its absolute most potent, and that's with his poetry. Because it's here that he left his most enduring mark and his most chilling warning.
This is from his poem, Return from Where You Came. It's this direct, totally defiant challenge to the people he believed were trying to drag the country backward to an era that Tunisia, in his eyes, had already evolved beyond. I mean, he's just drawing this clear line in the sand, right? He's asserting a modern, forward-looking identity for his country, one that just refuses to be bound by what he calls old dogmas and spells. But then, the whole tone shifts. He builds to this incredible climax with this really powerful metaphor. The Tunisian people, he says, are like a camel, a symbol of patience and resilience. But that patience, well, it has its limits. And that's the final, chilling warning. It just captures the full power of Neisenut's voice. A poet who championed the promise of a revolution, but never, ever lost sight of the fire that could consume it all. His blog is a time capsule of a nation's hope and fear, and it leaves us with a question for any democratic transition. When a patient people finally explode, what's left in the ashes?